The cold wind whipped through the city streets as James Sterling stepped out of his sleek black car, his polished shoes clicking against the wet pavement. He barely noticed the chill. His mind was too preoccupied with business, deals, and the million-dollar empire he had built from the ground up. That was his life now. Success, power, and never looking back. But tonight, something felt different. As he walked towards the high-end restaurant where his colleagues were waiting, a faint voice reached his ears. "Sir, please, can you spare anything?" James stopped. He never usually paid attention to the people sitting on the sidewalks, wrapped in thin blankets, their faces hidden behind layers of struggle and desperation. But something about this voice made him turn his head. There, sitting against the brick wall, was a young woman, barely more than a girl. Her skin was dark, her hair tangled, and her clothes were worn and thin against the cold. She didn't look up, her fingers trembling as she clutched a small empty paper cup. James felt a strange tightening in his chest. He had seen many homeless people before, but there was something unsettlingly familiar about her. It was in the shape of her face, the way her nose crinkled as she shivered. His heart pounded, but he quickly pushed the feeling away. "I don't have cash," he said, flatly, already reaching for his wallet to drop a few bills. The girl finally looked up, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Deep brown eyes, wide with sadness and exhaustion, but also something else, something piercing. James's breath caught in his throat. Those eyes. No, it wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But as he stood there, frozen, a memory came rushing back, a past he had buried long ago, a woman's laughter, a promise left broken, and a child, his child. James stumbled back slightly, gripping the edges of his coat as his world suddenly tilted on its axis. His heart pounded against his ribs, his pulse roaring in his ears. Could it be? The girl blinked at him, confused by his reaction. "Sir?" she asked hesitantly. James swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. He was being ridiculous. This was just some stranger, another lost soul in the city, nothing more. But deep down, he wasn't so sure. And as he stood there, staring into the face of the young woman before him, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Had he just found the daughter he never knew he had? James couldn't move, his hands clenched into fists, as his mind raced with memories he had long buried. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But the way she looked at him, the familiar shape of her face, it sent a chill down his spine. The girl shifted uncomfortably under his intense gaze, pulling her thin coat tighter around herself. "Look, mister, if you don't have anything, it's okay," she muttered, lowering her head again. James forced himself to snap out of it. He wasn't even sure why he was standing here, staring at a homeless girl as if she held the answers to questions he hadn't dared to ask in years. He pulled out $100 bill and placed it in her cup. She looked at the bill in shock, then back up at him. "Are you serious? Get yourself something warm to eat," James said, his voice tight. He turned, ready to walk away, to shake off this strange, haunting feeling. But then, "My mom used to say my dad was rich." James stopped mid-step. The girl let out a small, hollow laugh. "She told me once that he was some rich guy who disappeared before I was born. Said he probably didn't even know I existed." She shrugged, twirling the bill between her fingers. "She never told me his name, though. Said it wouldn't change anything." James turned back, his throat dry. "Your mother?" He hesitated. "What was her name?" The girl furrowed her brows, eyeing him with suspicion. "Why do you care?" James inhaled sharply. "Just tell me," she sighed, rubbing her hands together for warmth. Her name was Maya. The world seemed to tilt. James' vision blurred for a second, as the name echoed in his mind. Maya, the woman he had once loved, the woman he had left behind. The memories came rushing in like a tidal wave. He had been young, ambitious, and foolish. His career had taken off faster than he had expected. And Maya, sweet, strong Maya, had been caught in the storm. They had been in love, but he had been too focused on his future to see what truly mattered. He had left, telling himself it was for the best. He had told himself that Maya would move on, find someone better, but he had never known she was pregnant. James's knees nearly buckled. Under the weight of realization, his gaze snapped back to the girl, taking in every detail of her face, her expression. This wasn't just some random homeless girl. She was his daughter. His heart pounded, and for the first time in years, he felt something crack inside him, something he had kept buried under years of success, wealth, and power. Your mother, he said carefully. What happened to her? The girl's face darkened. She glanced down, her fingers tightening around the money. She passed away, she said quietly. A few years ago, James felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Maya was gone, and this girl, his daughter, had been out here, alone, struggling to survive. A mix of guilt, regret, and something even deeper twisted inside him. How had he not known? How had he let this happen? The girl suddenly shifted, standing up. Thanks for the money, she said, stuffing the bill into her pocket. I should go. Panic flared in James's chest. He couldn't just let her walk away. Not now. Wait, he said quickly. What's your name? She hesitated, eyeing him warily. Skylar. Skylar. James swallowed hard. Where are you staying? Skylar narrowed her eyes. Why do you care? Because I'm your father. Because I abandoned your mother. Because I owe you more than just $100. But James couldn't say that. Not yet. He wasn't even sure she would believe him. Instead, he cleared his throat. Let me help you. Skylar let out a bitter chuckle. Help me? Rich people don't help people like me. She turned to walk away, her shoulders hunched against the cold. James felt desperation rise in his chest. He couldn't let her disappear. Skylar, wait! She stopped, but didn't turn around. He took a deep breath. I knew your mother. Skylar stiffened. Slowly she turned back to face him. What? James's heart was pounding. Maya, I knew her. A long time ago. Skylar stared at him, her expression unreadable. You knew my mom. Her voice was soft, uncertain. James nodded, carefully choosing his next words. She never told me about you. A long silence stretched between them. Skylar's fingers twitched, as if she didn't know whether to run or stay. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. James took a step closer, lowering his voice. I wish I was. Skylar's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the trick. Her walls were up. James could see that, and he couldn't blame her. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. If you knew her, then tell me something about her. James swallowed. He didn't have to think long. She used to hum when she was nervous, he said softly. She loved thunderstorms, but she was terrified of lightning. She hated coffee, but drank it anyway because she liked the smell. He hesitated. And she loved you more than anything. Skylar's breath hitched. Her eyes glistened, but she quickly blinked the emotion away. James felt his own throat tighten. This girl, his daughter, had grown up without him. She had suffered, struggled, and lived on the streets while he sat in luxury, unaware, and now he had a choice. He could walk away, Pretend this never happened. Let his life continue as it was, or he could fix what was broken. Skylar wiped at her nose, shivering again. I don't know what you want from me, she mumbled. James took a deep breath. I want to help. Skylar scoffed. Why? Because you feel bad. James didn't answer right away. He didn't have the right words yet. Finally he said, because I should have been there. Another silence. Skylar looked away, her walls still up, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. James knew this wasn't going to be easy. He had missed too much time, too many years. But as he stood there, looking at the daughter he never knew he had, he made a silent promise. He wasn't going to lose her again. Not this time. Skylar stood there, staring at James, her body tense, like she was ready to run at any moment. James could see the battle happening inside her. Years of hurt, of disappointment, of surviving on her own. She didn't trust easily. And why should she? Life had been cruel to her. James felt the weight of his own guilt pressing down on him. He had spent years building his wealth, his empire, thinking he had everything. But standing here now, facing the daughter he never knew, he realized how blind he had been. He had been chasing success while his own blood had been struggling to survive. Skylar crossed her arms, her voice sharp. So what? You suddenly care now, James exhaled. I should have cared a long time ago. Skylar's eyes flickered with something. Pain, maybe anger. But she shook her head. You don't even know me. James stepped closer. Then, let me. Skylar scoffed. But there was something fragile in the way she looked away. You can't just show up and fix everything. I know, James admitted. But that doesn't mean I won't try. She studied him for a long moment, as if searching for the lie. James held her gaze, hoping she could see the truth in his eyes. He wasn't here out of guilt. He wasn't here out of pity. He was here because she was his daughter, and he wasn't going to walk away this time. A cold gust of wind blew through the street, and Skylar shivered. Without thinking, James slipped off his expensive coat and placed it over her shoulders. She stiffened, but didn't push it off. Are you hungry? James asked gently. Skylar hesitated, then nodded once, almost reluctantly. James gestured toward his car. Come on, let's get you something to eat. She didn't move right away. It was like she was trying to decide if she could trust him. But then, slowly, she took a step forward. James felt something shift inside him. This wasn't going to be easy. He had missed too many years, and there was no way to erase the pain she had been through. But maybe, just maybe, he could start making things right. They drove in silence, the city lights flickering past. James glanced at Skylar every now and then, watching as she clutched his coat tightly around herself, staring out the window with a faraway look in her eyes. He wanted to ask her a million questions, where she had been, what she had been through. But he knew he had to be patient. Trust wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. They pulled up to a quiet diner, one of those late-night spots that served pancakes at all hours. Skylar hesitated as they stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room like she wasn't used to being somewhere warm. They sat down, and James watched as Skylar eyed the menu. When the waitress came, Skylar ordered cautiously, like she wasn't used to being able to choose. James made sure to order extra, just in case. As they waited for their food, James finally spoke. Skylar, I don't expect you to forgive me. She looked up, surprised. I don't expect you to trust me right away either, he continued. But I want to try, if you'll let me. Skylar swallowed, looking down at the table. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. James felt his heart squeeze. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Their food arrived, and for the first time that night, James saw something shift in Skylar's expression. She picked up her fork, took a bite, and closed her eyes for just a second, like she had forgotten what it felt like to have a warm meal. James watched her, his chest tight with emotions he wasn't used to feeling. This was just the beginning, and he knew there were still a million things to work through. But as he sat across from his daughter, watching her eat, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to lose her again. Skylar glanced up at him, something softer in her gaze. Now! So, you really knew my mom? James nodded. Yeah, I did. Skylar twirled her fork in her food, thinking. Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Can you tell me about her?" James smiled, feeling the warmth of old memories flooding back. "I'd love to." And just like that, a bridge was built between them. A fragile, uncertain bridge, but a bridge nonetheless. One that led to something new, something neither of them had ever expected. A second chance.